thanks the Norman and Florence Brody Family Foundation and the Brody family for their support of Brody initiatives at school. Norman and Florence Brody established the Norman and Florence Brody Family Foundation Public Policy Forum in 1996. Multiple forums are held annually at the university and in Washington, D.C., with a focus on public policy issues in the United States. Similarly, I'd like to thank Dr. Betty Duke, the Brody professor, for the invaluable role she plays in planning and executing these events, as well as Dean Orr for his participation in today's event. Thank you. This fall, the Brody Forum topics aim to cover a trifecta of issues that are critical to our school, communities, and country. Those are racism, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the upcoming U.S. presidential election. Today's forum features a moderated discussion between Dean Robert Orr and Nykidra or Nyki Robinson, and to take her own words, that's Nike like the god, not the shoe.
God is.
Glad I got that right. So a few words to introduce today's special guest. Nyki Robinson, as mentioned, is the founder and CEO of Baltimore-born Black Girls Vote. Nyki's life and work experience, combined with her interest in politics, drove her to create the Non-Partisan grassroots organization focused on encouraging and mobilizing African American women to use their voting power to advocate for issues that impact African American women and families. As the CEO, Nyki manages fundraising, numerous community and government initiatives and events. Her Party at the Mailbox voters education and activation campaign has kept that momentum amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, with the online event reaching 10,000 live viewers on the night of Baltimore City's pandemic-delayed primary elections. Nyki has previously served as the Director of Events for the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, as well as holding positions elsewhere in local and state governments. She served as a neighborhood liaison in Baltimore City's Mayor's Office, a Director of Outreach in Maryland's Lieutenant Governor's Office, and a Special Assistant to the Director for the Maryland's Department of Housing and Community Development. While in these positions, Nyki actualized the impact of policy decisions, engaged with residents about neighborhood initiatives, and organized events. Nyki, welcome to the School of Public Policy, virtually. Thank you for taking the time to address our campus community today. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to you for your opening remarks.
Thank you so much for having me, and I promise you all we are doing our best to get me connected to the video. I did not put this face on, makeup on for nothing. I'm so excited to be with you all today. And so what we're going to do until we get started, Megan, behind the scenes, she's going to click and show my slides. But more importantly, I want this to be a conversation. I want this to be an interaction, and I want you all to feel engaged, right? And so again, I am super excited to be here. I have want to start off with a video, but because I can't get my video going, I will hopefully can play it on the back end. Megan, just want to confirm that you have my slides.
Not just yet.
All right, so I will start off with just a Q&A. I don't know if the chat open in which we can just start a conversation, because I did have some questions here that I would like to ask some folks. And more importantly, what did you come to hear today? What would you like for me to questions you all were given, and as well had the opportunity to submit some questions. And so I did want the time to make sure I can address as many of your questions as possible. Let's start, and if the chat is active, I just want to hear about what you're looking forward to hearing from me today. And if I don't get to it, I will definitely do my best to cover it some way, somehow.
Sure. So the chat for all the attendees, the chat should be open. If you, in the to drop down, you should be able to select, I believe, yeah, you can send questions to everyone if you want to make sure everyone can see them. Or alternatively, I don't know if Nyki can see things that are directed to all panelists, so it's probably safest to go with everyone if you feel comfortable with that.
That's totally fine.
Cool. So Nyki, to check and see what you can see, do you see a question from Martin, or do you see questions from Martin and Grant in the chat, or do you not presently?
I do not. I don't see the chat from my end.
Oh, Okay.
So if you could read them to me, that would be great.
Absolutely, anytime. So we've got Martin asking, what are some strategies that you use to turn out voters? And Grant asking, how do you keep volunteers engaged and active through your grassroots movement? Is it difficult to motivate people for long periods of time? So.
Oh, absolutely. And that's some of the things I'm going to cover in my slide. I tell people all the time, this has been the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life, also the most rewarding. And as I get into my story and tell you, when I started Black Girls Vote, it wasn't because everything was going right in my life. I had this perfect life and things were just all aligning up. I had a few things happen to me that pretty much changed the trajectory of my life. And so because of those things happened, I was at a time in myself where I wasn't always the most confident or felt like I could do it. I struggled internally. One of the things we'll cover is imposter syndrome, right? In this space and placing and questioning myself and did I do something wrong? Am I on the right path? And if I'm trying to motivate other people to vote, I'm trying to motivate myself as well, right? So those are some of the things. But looking further out and looking at the greater call, right, and what's for the greater good, that it's not necessarily about me. It's about the impact of voting, the impact and the change it could have on our communities, particularly as a Black woman. And I know my grandmother, my aunties, it's so critical for them to vote because they talk about the civil rights movement. They talk about all of the things that happened. And so as I stand here as a Black woman, I said, I don't have the option to give up. I had a conversation with Jesse Jackson at one point. I was like, I'm tired. He said, don't be tired, be determined. And I said, wow, don't be tired, be determined. And so what does that mean? Oftentimes, and some of you are in college trying to figure it out and you're tired, you're exhausted, looking at the screens every single day. It's exhausting. So I tell you, as he told me, don't be tired, but be determined. And so I'm going to start off with the video that they're going to play on the back end. And so we're going to start with that, and then we'll get into some more questions, I promise you. And if I don't do anything else, I will be on this screen before this thing ends, okay?
I appreciate that determination. And I will say, just from your audio, you and I have never met, but just from your audio, how do you motivate voters? How do you mobilize people to get out to vote? That is how, that kind of determination and that kind of inner commitment is powerful. It's contagious. So thank you for bringing us that energy.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Claire. Claire, pardon me, for just having me here today and being in this space. And I'm so excited. I was up all night going over everything, but the one thing that I did not go over is WebEx, right? But no, we're super excited, and we're going to go ahead and get ready to share the video.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I am a Black girl who votes.
I am a Black girl who votes.
I am a Black girl who votes.
Because my daughter deserves a better future.
Because I have 2 Black children.
Because we deserve better.
Because it's my right.
I am a Black girl who votes.
I'm a Black girl who votes.
I'm a Black girl who votes.
Because everyone deserves access to affordable health care.
Because I want better education for our children.
Because my vote can impact change.
I'm a Black girl who votes.
I'm a Black girl who votes.
I'm a Black girl who votes because my children vote.
Yeah. I'm a Black girl that votes
because my ancestors,
our ancestors
fought for us.
And some even died.
For my voice to be elevated.
Because we cannot afford to be silent.
I'm a Black girl who votes.
I am a Black girl who votes.
Because policy,
representation,
our very freedoms,
my city,
my children,
my vote.
Breonna Taylor's life.
Because my voice
matters.
Because my vote, plus my first time vote, plus your vote is more powerful together.
All right, so I'll just go over the slides here as I have my slides. And again, this is something that's my internal, but I could definitely share it afterwards with folks. And it started off with the video, right? And I have a picture that you'll see. And I wanted to see if there was anyone who could recognize any of the women in the photo and what that photo means to me. And again, I'll share the photo with you guys afterwards, but it's but I want to start and give you guys a walkthrough of my journey and who I am and where I'm from and how did I get into this space and place that I am in now. All right, so my roadmap. So this is my roadmap here. And my roadmap has, where did I start out? I am born and raised in Baltimore. It looks like Raphael is in the file, so it looks like he'll be pulling it up soon. I'm born and raised in Baltimore. Maryland. I went to Randallstown High School, for some of you who may have heard of that, in Baltimore County. And after that, I went to Frostburg State University. So I stayed in state, went to Western Maryland, graduated with a degree in marketing. And then soon after, when I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I called it a quarter life crisis, right? So my last semester, like many people, it was a light semester, but I took an intro to Chinese class. And so my professor at the time said, this summer we were taking students to Beijing. And so for me, as a marketing major, I was like, oh, I want to do global work. I want to do international work and work in business. So I'm going to go to China. So I went to China, came back to the States and was looking for a job. And I got my first real job, I would say, working in the mayor's office. And that's because a friend who went to Frostburg with me said, hey, I work in the mayor's office because Mayor O'Malley is now Governor O'Malley and Council President Dixon is now Mayor Dixon, and she needs people on her team. And I said, sure, why not? And I did a lot of community engagement work, and that's when I saw firsthand the impact of politics. I had absolutely no desire to work in politics. If someone would have told me 15 years ago that I would be leading the non-partisan organization called Black Girls Vote, I don't know if I would have believed it. I would have believed I would be doing something in leadership, but not anything around voting. And it was there in the mayor's office where one day I could be in one of the roughest neighborhoods in the morning. And then later on that evening, I'm at the Preakness in Pimlico Racetrack and dealing with the wealthiest people in some of the country. And so I saw there at that moment, everyone was still asking the mayor for something, no matter where you were from. If you were from the inner city, you were looking for, police patrol, board of houses, trash. But if you're a wealthy person, you're talking about businesses, some of the behind the scenes things, what's going on with this company, contracts and things like that. And so I got to see the power of this one person, and that really, really made me dive into the political world. And then what happened next is I got a job working in the governor's office for Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown. I was his director of outreach. And we know that, he was a candidate for governor in 2014, but he wasn't successful. But I had the opportunity to serve under his administration for a while. All right, next, I'm going to go on to the next slide. And let me know when you guys have them up.
We do see the slides. So
okay, so I'm reading about,
we are on history of the Black women's vote.
Perfect. Okay, so now I can look at it because I've been looking at my slides versus here. Okay, great. All right, so then next. All right, so let's go into the history, particularly of the Black women's vote. Next slide. All right, so I'll just start with overall just looking at the Black vote as a whole, right? And if we looked at it, we know in 1870 that, the 15th Amendment was passed. But again, that did not include Black women, but also with men. You had to own land in order to vote, and we know that was some of the northern states. But what was also critical, I looked at this quote by author Mamie Locke, and it says, she participated, but she watched as her status moved from 3/5 to 0 with the passage of the 15th Amendment in 1870. And so, at one time we were considered 3/5 of the human, but at least then you were considered something. But not having that right to vote, it's almost like your status declines. And that's with the passage of the 15th Amendment. And when I saw that quote, I said, wow. And, as a Black woman, like how that could have made them feel back then. And then looking now, passes with the 19th Amendment and the women's suffrage movement. And we know that this year we celebrated 100 years of the women's suffrage movement. And but what does that mean for us particularly? And I, had a conversation earlier, and I've had this conversation throughout, that how does that feel for Black women? And not necessarily Black women are eager to celebrate the women's suffrage movement. Why? Because we did not get our right to vote in 1920, unlike other organizations or other women, and there were a lot of Black women who were a part of that suffrage movement. When we talk about Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Mary Church Terrell, who was one of the first Black women to get a college degree, and even myself as being a member of a sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, that was one of our first acts of public service, was participating in the women's suffrage movement. But again, in 1920, and Black women felt betrayed. When white women got their right to vote, they often forgot about us, and it wasn't until 1965 that we were given our right to vote. And so that's one of the things that even nowadays as Black women, we talk about. Should we be celebrating the 100th anniversary knowing that we felt betrayed? Many of us did, particularly Black women, doing more research about that. So I think that's often not shared in the history books. We don't talk about that. That's not something that I grew up knowing completely. But that's when you start digging deeper in and we start talking about those things that block us as Black women, or women particularly. All right, next slide. Now you can skip to the next one. All right, so this is the civil rights movement. And so when we talk about the civil rights movement, we say that the Voting Rights Act of 1965, right? And as you see these images and you see these pictures, one of the things that's super critical is that we know that a lot of Black people, as we would know, were marching across Selma. You guys know about Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama. And some would say that this is the most important piece of legislation, the Voting Rights Act, the passage of 1965, right, when we got our rights to vote. But what's also critical is that these movements started from young people, a lot of college students, whether you're looking at the NAACP and all those things and SNCC. And that's one of the things that motivate me are young people, right? These movements are started by young people, and this is just an image here. And before I get into me, I think it's so critical to talk about the shoulders that I stand on. And I could not be doing this work had it not been for the women of the Sojourner Truth, the Mary Church Terrell, or the civil rights movements, those people who literally gave their lives for our right to vote and for access to the polls. Next slide. All right, so the Black vote. And so this is one of the motivating factors of why I started Black Girls Vote. Just look at the history of voting, particularly around races and voting, when we look at, Black people and our participation in voting. And when I was, doing some research, I looked at in 2012, particularly, and it's the chart to the right, the turnout rate, and just things about that, the Black turnout had increased. But more importantly, 70% of Black women had voted at a higher rate than any other demographic in 2012, right? And so that means white women, white men, Black men, that Black women turned out. And so we'll see that Black women, you showed up and you showed out for the polls. But, as we're moving forward in our country, it's like, Black women continuously show up, we show up, we show up. But what does that look like for us when it comes to policy, right? And overall, the Black vote was 66%, but then we know Black women was 70%, and an overwhelmingly percentage of them voted for President Barack Obama. All right, so my story, right? So I told you about the story pre-Black Girls Vote, but now me getting into Black Girls Vote. All right, next slide. All right, so does anyone know who that gentleman is, the top left? It says spring 2015, he has on a red shirt, and I can see the chat. If anyone could just tell me who they think he is in that chat, if you have an idea. No guesses?
Can you see Martin? Martin said Freddie Gray.
Correct. Yes. All right. So yes, you're absolutely correct. Freddie Gray. And so when people were watching it all over the country and all over the world, my parents, my family members, they were calling me and like, "Are you okay? Do you need to come in the county or the suburbs where it's safe? Because this is my neighborhood. The helicopters, or I can see everything, you can hear some of the things, because I live within walking distance of Mondawmin Mall where the riots kick off." And so, but I was okay. But like many of us, the next day I was out in the community figuring out what we can do. What can we do as far as a community member to help solve some of these issues? And then soon after that, I thought of the Black Girls Vote, because again, coming off 2008 and 2012, I said, Black women mobilized. We're going into 2016. How about we get more Black women to come together and start talking about the issues that impact us? But I didn't move on Black Girls Vote. Then I got dismissed from my job, my political appointee job, because Governor Hogan won the election. So I went to work one day. I had a job and did not. And I cried, because for me, and I'll get into this in a few slides, I am often a breadwinner in my family, and I'm the one who helps my family members. So I remember that day losing my job, and my niece was like, "Auntie, can you pay for me to get my hair done?" And I'm like, I didn't tell them because I was afraid to tell, and didn't want folks to be disappointed. That had just lost my job, my political appointee job. But I was like, okay, I'll do it. Them not knowing what's going on. But then that happened, losing my job. But then the fall, that's the reason, or I would say the straw that broke my camel's back, and that's because someone got murdered directly across the street from me. And I was afraid, and the murder happened, and it looked like a drug transaction that had gone bad. And it's all tied to policy one way, shape, or another. And I said, you know what, we're going to do this thing. So on November 30th, we launched Black Girls Vote at Western High School, which is the oldest all-girl public high school in the nation. Next slide. But not only did we launched on the birth date of the late and great Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman elected into the House of Representatives. And it was Shirley who said, You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas. And it was just a perfect fit. Black Girls Vote was an idea, it's a vision, but how do we move forward and how do we make progress? And that's someone like myself, no longer sitting on anything and just implementing this idea, not knowing what would come out of it now, 5 years later. All right, so what's Black Girls Vote? So Black Girls Vote, we are a non-profit, non-partisan organization, next slide, who's committed to uplifting the Black community and Black women, particularly those 18 to 25 years old. And, for us as an organization, people would say, why Black women, why this and that? And that's because some of the issues that impact us in our community specifically. And our mission or our vision is to elevate the quality of life of Black women globally. And so as we are an organization based in Maryland, our goal is to expand not only nationally, but also internationally as well. And I share here at the bottom, you may see the picture. I'm not sure how big it is. That's a picture of Curl Mosley Braun and the late, great Elijah Cummings, who was my mentor. And for those who don't know about Curl Mosley Braun, before there was a Hillary Clinton, a Kamala Harris, and all those who ran for president, Curl Mosley Braun was the first Black woman elected to the United States Senate. So it's her and Kamala Harris. Those are the only two in our history. And she was our keynote speaker at our Black Girls Vote Ball 2 years ago. And Elijah Cummings, again, a mentor. So when he passed, I was devastated. But, he poured so much into me. And as we first started the organization. All right, next slide. So what do we do as an organization, right? And why do we do what we do? Because there's a lot of bias when we talk about Black women and some of the things that impact us in our community. When we talk about systematic racism, when we talk about gender discrimination, and sometimes as Black women, we're looked upon as the double negative, being one, Black, and then two, a woman. And so, again, there are a lot of things that are happening in our community that impacts us differently. When we talk about healthcare and some of the burdens that Black women carry, such as our health concerns, whether it's diabetes, cancer, hypertension, that's critical. We know that Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. And so that impacts us and that hurts us in our communities. When we talk about economic development, 62% on the dollar on which a Black woman is paid compared to others. Starting businesses, you'll read articles that Black women are the fastest group of entrepreneurs in the country. However, we don't have access to capital. We don't have the same ability to get loans or get funding and such of that nature. However, we're starting the businesses, but we don't have the support. We don't have the technical assistance. And so those are the things that will not only take you from surviving, but thriving. Those are the issues that are impacting us. When we talk about education, we talk about Black kids and are likely, next slide, are likely to be disciplined quicker than others, right? And so we talk about Black women getting our college degrees, getting all these things that are happening to us. Black girls, again, are 5.5 times more likely to be suspended from school than white girls. When we talk about how Black girls are treated older and often viewed as promiscuous and hypersexualized, right? That's our community. When we talk about Black women with natural hairstyles are often perceived as less professional. When we talk about Black women, so these are all things that Black women so that we face. Now I have to go into every single slide, all right? Every single detail. But you get an idea of why it was so critical and so important for me to start an organization where we're mobilizing Black women so we can talk about the issues that are impacting us. So Black Girls Vote, these are some of the things that we do. And I'm going to wrap up soon because I know Q&A, Dean. Voter registration, voter education, mobilization. You talked about part of the mailbox player. I'll get into that. Advocacy, and that's talking about those issues that impact us in our community. How do we mobilize? And I'll tell anyone, my goal and vision of Black Girls Vote is to have one of the largest voting blocks in the country, to be a stakeholder. So when we are talking about election 2020 and the organizations who need to be at the forefront, when we talk about those policies, when we talk about how many dollars are going to this particular cause that impact us, because we'll often hear the words, I'm going to improve this, I'm going to do better, and I'm going to do this, but we need specific numbers and we need metrics to go by. And those are some of the things that we have been able to do, but I want to be a little bit more assertive in our demands because, as I mentioned before, we are a strong demographic when it comes to voting, and our votes are often needed, and you'll often hear Black women. But what do we get in exchange? What do we get in return for our vote? Our Collegiate Ambassador Program, I'm so excited to see where that's going with our collegiate chapters. Have one that I'll show on the next slide. And then next, our goal for 2021 is to create a national internship program 2 of my interns were not able to join. Well, they are on, but I don't know if they're in the viewer side, so I'm not going to attempt to bring them over. I want to focus on me getting on the screen first. But just want to talk to them. Hoda and Chiamaka, I don't know if they joined, but both of them are at Harvard University, and I've had the ability to work with them over since May of this year, even though their internship ended in ended in August, that they decided to come back in the fall. And this past weekend, I met them for the first time. We went out to dinner because they're all over the country, but then they came. We actually met in New York, but it was our first time interacting with each other, and just to see and having a chance to talk to them and talk about the experience that they were able to get through Black Girls Vote through our internship. That's so critical. And next year, I want to make sure that more Black girls are given these opportunities, not just with Black Girls Vote, but some of our top organizations, some of our top companies in the country. And as we're doing this, I want someone here in the chat to let me know who name a Black woman who is the head of a Fortune 500 company. You can drop it in the chat, and then Claire will let me know a Black woman who's the head, the president or CEO of a Fortune 500 company. All right, so to summarize this in chapters, we have Morgan State University, American University, North Carolina A&T, Howard University. They just identified the executive board, so we're expanding there. And our goal by next year is to have 20 collegiate chapters of Black Girls Vote. Hopefully we'll have one at University of Maryland, College Park. All right, next slide. All right, and so these are some of our accomplishments. Again, we've registered thousands and thousands of voters, trained hundreds of women to conduct voter registration. We've got national recognition from Queen Latifah, Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams. This past Friday, I was on MSNBC, which was an amazing experience. We've done a research, and then we also did our Party at the Mailbox campaign, which I'll share with you in the next 2 slides. All right, so what's Party of the Mailbox? So Party of the Mailbox, like many of us, we had to pivot because of COVID-19. COVID-19, we had to spring into action and say, what's one way that we can mobilize voters and create something that's exciting and that's fun? And we brought the party to them in this customized box. And here you'll see the Baltimore box. Right now, we are in the midst of activating. We have activations in Detroit, Philadelphia, as well as Baltimore. So if you know anyone in any of those cities, Baltimore, Philadelphia, or Detroit, have them go to partyatthemailbox.com and they can request their customized box. But more importantly, outside of the goodies in there, we had information and education about voting. We know that particularly in our communities, Black communities, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So we wanted to be a trusted source of information, but also create some fun and excitement. And as you mentioned earlier, Claire, on election night, we hosted a virtual party, and we'll be doing the same this election night, but this time it'll be with 3 cities. And as we call it, the battle and or the taste of Philly, the taste of Detroit, and the taste of Baltimore. Next slide.
And Nyki, if I can let you know, I've got Martin coming up in the chat. Ursula Burns was the CEO of Xerox, but there are currently no Black women that head a Fortune 500 company.
Can you say that again, Claire?
Sure. So Ursula Burns was the CEO of Xerox, and this is from Martin, but there are currently no Black women that head a Fortune 500 company.
Exactly. And I heard you the first time, right? But I want you to say that again because representation matters. And so when we talk about Black women and where we are in these places and spaces, there are no Black women. You had Ursula Burns. But now as you look modern day, when we look at young children, when we look at how do we get access and to these spaces and places, we don't see Black women at the top. That's problematic, right? And so those are some of the things that we talk about daily within our community. And how do we elevate the voices of Black women? It starts with in the boardrooms. It starts leading those corporations. And so that's why it's so critical that we have people who are out there who are having the conversation. But, as I mentioned to you all before, I mentioned my accomplishments, right? But, to be real and to be honest, there are some challenges in leading a nonpartisan organization who started when we started. As I mentioned, I started it with no funding, money on my pocket. I had just lost my job. And so as we're growing and I'm trying to figure it out, funding is something that's real. Having full-time staff, identifying resources for staff and technical assistance. Social capital is so real and critical because, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, with the questions with the dean, and I'm wrapping up, having access to some of those spaces and places that I don't have access too, it's so critical that others who may have access to those spaces sponsor us, and not necessarily sponsor us financially, but saying, you know what, have you heard of this organization? Have you heard of the work that they're doing? Oh, I didn't know. Oh, we have this grant for $50,000, $100,000 that I may not have been able to get into because of you have access. So social capital is real. But some of the challenges, I'm exhausted a lot of times, right? I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I'm hardly sleeping. And, you know, trying to figure out the balance, right? How do you balance your professional life, building a nonprofit organization, and your personal life, and, you know, wanting to have kids and things like that. And so those are some of the things that we struggle. And, you know, you look at Black women who are 84% of breadwinners or co-breadwinners and leading households. And then also imposter syndrome, like, wait, am I supposed to be here? I don't know. And then the sacrifices I mentioned, it's a huge sacrifice leading an organization such as this. All right. Next slide, please. All right, so last slide. I want to talk about community organizer because I know some folks are like, what can I do from where I am at home? What does that look like? And it's fixing community organizing, right? And it connects people with common concerns and mobilizes them to identify solutions, right? All of you can be community organizers, right? And you're fixing broken social systems. And how do you change that? You're empowering vulnerable and oppressed populations. And someone said you are a community organizer. I look at it as a multiple things. Yes, I am a community organizer, but I'm also an entrepreneur as well, a social entrepreneur. All right, next slide. So these are some of the suggestions or things that I say that you can do from wherever you are. How you get involved, you know, look at which issues matter most to you. Are there any organizations on campus that you can get involved with? Which organizations suit your interests? Follow them on social media, subscribe to their newsletter, attend currently their virtual events. Reach out to someone on the team, get a mentor, and more importantly, vote. Vote this election. All right, and just so you guys can see the power of the college vote this year as we are in elections, so I encourage all of you to vote and why. When we look at the midterms, we saw that college students, the turnout, you know, had risen. But I also look at Black women, right? And so how in 2014 and 2018, how we've risen from 34 to 43%. We expect more Black women to vote this election, as well as other women as a whole have risen. And so that's so critical in this election, understanding the power that our young collegians have during this election. And that's the power that you have. And that is it for me. You can go to the next slide. So here's my information here. If you guys want to get in contact with us, blackgirlsvote.com, send us an email at blackgirlsvote.com and all that, and that would be great. So you guys, I'm going to try getting on from my phone. I am so depressed that I cannot be there visually, but I am going to work it out. And so as we are working on it, so with that being said, I'm going to Q&A with Dean Orr, and I am just loving the conversation or just being with you all today. So I am working. I promise you I am.
Thank you so much, Nyki. That was fantastic. It would be nice to get the video, but we got the message out. She's there.
From my phone now.
All right. We'll take it.
Okay. Can you see me?
We can.
Okay, great. Yay, I'm so excited. Okay.
Excellent.
I told you guys I would do it.
I am seeing some incredibly good questions in the chat. So I am going to just start with one question, and then I want to move straight to our students and faculty and staff that are putting all these great questions in the chat. And my question to you, Nyki, is I can tell you've been focused on leadership for a while. You even minored in leadership studies at Frostburg, and you've played leadership positions in government, in nonprofit sector, and even in the private sector with the Chamber of Commerce. I want to hear from you, what is Nyki's secret sauce for leadership, and does it translate across government, nonprofit, and private sector, or are there differences for how you lead in those different sectors?
I would first start with having belief, right? And that's belief in myself and my ability to do. Because as I mentioned, oftentimes we deal with imposter syndrome, and I would say, like, wait, is it really happening? But I also knew at a young age that I would do something great, and it wasn't anything to be braggadocious or cocky or anything like that. I know that so many people believe that about themselves, But I just knew that, there was something that I had to do and that I was on, and I am just a vessel. And so as I'm in those spaces and places, I often look at the greater good and understand that it's not about me in those positions. So I think when you're leading from a place of passion, but then also understanding the overall picture. And so it's me, and I would say working in the mayor's office at the time, a community leader would call me and say, hey, can you get the trash picked up in my neighborhood, or I need police patrol doing a walk through the neighborhood. And so for me, when I'm delayed and not doing things, it's impacting how someone can live and their quality of life, because in some of these cities or communities in inner city, they're struggling. And so it's the little things that they will cuss me out one day, but then the next day if I do something for them, oh, you're the best, thank you so much, right? And so that's a leader understanding that, for one, it's not about me, it's about the next person. And leading Black Girls Vote, it's extremely challenging, it's extremely hard. 2 days ago, I had a breakdown, and, I say that, to be honest, like, I'm crying, like, what have you gotten yourself into, right? Mm-hmm. Leading multiple organizations, multiple activations with the staff, not a full-time staff, all contractual staff, and then making sure that I'm sensitive enough to make sure that I'm communicating and being an effective communicator, even when I'm stressed out. And so being a leader, being able to take a step back and look inward, but then also being able to get help when you need it. And I would say sometimes being a leader, well, always, you can lead, but then you also have to be comfortable with being led, because it's not easy, and everyone needs someone. So for those of you trying to figure out how to navigate in those spaces, I would also say getting a mentor, right? Getting someone who has your best interest at heart that you can call and say, look, I have a question about XYZ. What do you think about this? And those people who will guide you in the right direction are so critical. And sometimes they can work in your industry and sometimes they don't. But these are people that you have to have a team around you who are uplifting you and supporting you along the way.
Fantastic. Let me move to some of the questions. I would love to have folks be able to ask their own questions, but I know with our technical issues that might be difficult. So let me just pose Kelly's question to you. She says, I often run into the problem of being the only Black woman or person of color in an office. I will sometimes hesitate to apply to certain places because I don't want to be the only person of color. Do you have any advice for me as someone who is just beginning their career on how to deal with this?
Hi, Kelly. Such an amazing and great question. And I would definitely say, as I just mentioned, look into people within the organization, but then also outside of the organization, or people who are doing jobs very similar to the one that you're looking or obtaining to get at, right, or grow into. But then also finding allies within that organization. And I did a panel recently, and I was talking to women who were, it was the Maryland Top 100 Women. And we did a panel, and one of the things we talked about, and I said, someone asked, what could white women do in this space and place to support Black women? I said, step up and support women who you may see in a case and place that you may see, hey, they started at the same time as this person, but I don't see them, growing at the same rate. And so you're going to need allies within your workspace. And sometimes that is a little uncomfortable, feeling like you're the only and not wanting to speak up. But I tell you that there's so many people that will support you, and they always don't have to look like you, and finding people that can support you within the organization, but then also looking out of the organization of people who are in the same industry, in the same field. Again, back to that mentor, getting a coach that people will help you. And a lot of it, too, is building that confidence, right? Being confident within yourself. And that may be leadership development classes, public speaking classes, whatever that may be. And then again, it goes back to the belief that I mentioned earlier, that I deal with, like believing in myself and understanding that, hey, if Kelly gets in this position, Kelly can open the door for another Black girl or another person. So Kelly doesn't have an option. Kelly has to do it. And so that's how I go into that space. And that's why I opened up with the video, because all of those women, they believe in the mission of Black Girls Vote. They believe in the work of Black Girls Vote. And had I not started Black Girls Vote, some women would have not been in I'm not going to say they would not have been in position, but I've seen women grow from being connected to Black Girls Vote. And that's because I stepped out on faith in something that was very hard for me to do. As I mentioned, things were not going great for me, but I did it anyway. And so I would tell you, have faith over fear. And Kelly, you got it. You can do it. I can't wait to hear about you and read about you. I need your last name so I know the Kelly that I'm looking for.
We'll get you that.
Okay.
I've been told that we can now get some more people into the conversation. So while they get some folks into the conversation, let me just pose one more from the chat. Grant asks, what does Election Day look like for Black Girls Vote?
Can I get to 13 days away? It's so crazy. It's so stressful. So right now we have 2 events taking place now. One in Philadelphia now. That's a rally that's taking place where we're activating about 50 volunteers to go out and do some outreach, and that's before election. And then in Detroit, we're doing something with a big brand where the media and press is covering an event there where we're putting together boxes. So election day, we'll be hosting our party, which is election night, where we, of course, in a lot of things live streaming. We're doing a few activations in Baltimore, hosting a voting center where people are going to be in the polls and line voting. And so things that happen in real time, but our big thing is getting the boxes out, sending out 10,000 boxes to individuals to encourage them to vote, or giving them information, I would say, and education about voting to make sure that they have everything they need. And as we're preparing for our election night celebration, where we're celebrating election, where we're looking and expecting thousands of people to join us, a lot of troubleshooting there as well. So a lot of work on the front end. This Friday, we're doing a big event with Under Armour in Maryland, Stuff in the Box, which is one of our big sponsors. So it's managing a lot of these relationships, and managing the delivery of boxes, doing a lot of promo and ads and stuff around getting out the vote and things of that nature. And so, Grant, if you want to help me, I'll give you my email address. If you want to take on some of this stress.
I think that's one of the answers for what we can do. I think just volunteer for Nyki. That's a good contribution. I see Ella Clark. Ella, you want to launch the next question?
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
Hi, Ella.
Thank you. Hi, Nyki. Thank you so much for being here with us. I wanted to ask, so the School of Public Policy is really sort of beginning the journey towards actively becoming anti-racist, and wanted to hear from you about, what can faculty, staff, and students do to really create safe spaces for Black students? Mm-hmm. Academia is, historically white, and so what can we do? And then also, how can we highlight the concerns and interests of Black women, both in the school, but also outside of our school?
Yeah. And it starts within. We have those conversations where Black women don't feel safe in spaces. And you guys have heard the quote time and time again, the most unprotected, disrespected woman in America is the Black woman. And that's something that we believe is true. And I'm not going to say we because we're not a monolithic as far as Black women, but I think it's also recognizing it and starting having those conversations. And some of those conversations are not comfortable conversations. And that's how growth happens. And what does that look like in a safe space, starting small, but then getting larger? And then having commitments from some of the faculty and staff and start looking at how do we diversify some of these spaces and places? What's our internship pool looking like, right? What's the as far as the new students that are coming on enrollment rate amongst minority students, and where are they coming from? Are they coming from some of those spaces and places, such as Baltimore City, right? The city of Philadelphia, those areas that are predominantly African American, that a lot of times, and I'll tell people time and time again, it's not like Black women aren't smart enough and we aren't creative enough, is that we need access. And I'll speak particularly in experience for me, leading party at the polls, for instance. Leading Black Girls Vote as an organization as a whole, struggling to get funding and support, has been very challenging. We came up with this concept, Party at the Polls, and we've been able to get more funding for Party at the Polls than I've been able to get over Black Girls Vote for the last 5 years, right? And that's because aligning with someone, and Dean Orr may know Sam Novi, and the National Conference on Citizenship, and they saw the vision. And so for that, we're raising capital. We're able to expand into these 3 different cities. And that's because someone sponsored me and sponsored as far as Sam and spoke up for me and said, hey, have you heard of Black Girls Vote? Have you heard of this campaign that they're doing? They're doing great things. This is going to be a national program. And so there are so many Black girls or Black people in spaces that they just need access to an opportunity. So it's not like people are better than us or smarter than us. It's that you all, and I'm not going to say you particularly, others have more access to resources that we don't have. And so social capital is real when we talk about Black women who are running for office. Some of their challenges is raising money. The first place you go is to your family and friends. If your family and friends don't have wealth or income, that they can, disposable income that they can just share and support you, they're trying to survive. So we aren't talking about the economics as well as the elections and the support, then we'll continue to do this cycle over and over again because we need the support, whether it's, again, the social capital, absolutely, we need the financial support, but then we also need to have these conversations. And let's put some metrics behind it. We can say we're going to have these conversations, but how are we really improving it? Where last year we had, this amount percentage enrolled African American, where this year it's grown up. But then what about leadership? Who are they? Are they leading clubs? Are they able to control budgets? Because all of this looks good. resumes and going forward. And Dean, and hopefully I answered your question. And Dean, I know that we were technically late, so I don't have to end at 1. If there are more questions, if you have time, I do want to be respectful of this time and this space and grateful for so many of you who joined today.
Well, if you can give us a little more time, we will take it gladly. So
I most certainly will.
let's keep rolling here, and I'm told that we can get someone else in on the. I'm not seeing any more.
Yeah,
okay, please.
That is correct. We have Professor Robinson. I think has been promoted. So Professor Robinson, if you can turn your video on, that's great. I think we should be able to hear you. But you submitted a question, so please fire away.
Hi, thank you so much for this. This has been such an important session and learned a lot for all of us. I wanted to ask you about voter suppression. You know, it's not just historical. There are currently active efforts on voter suppression, particularly the votes of Black community. Can you speak a little bit to what our students can be doing to advance voting rights, not just in this election, but future elections?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. When we talk about voter suppression, it's not necessarily voter suppression is you having to wait in line for 10 hours. That's voter suppression. Even though you may have everything you need to vote, but if you're going to wait in line for 10 hours, that's not acceptable, right? That's voter suppression. I was on the phone with Hoda, my intern, and she may be here, and she's like, they're not trying to send me my ballot. And she's from South Carolina, and she said, I'm about to go off. But Hoda is someone who is really passionate about voting but for the normal person, they're not going to put the extra time and energy because voting has to be convenient. And so what does that look like? It's lobbying. For us in Maryland, for those in Maryland, you know, we thought it was so critical that because we are in the middle of a pandemic, is making sure ballots were mailed to you in the general election as well. But that wasn't. It was just the application. But elected officials, they respond to pressure. They respond to the continuum, you know, the continuity of you guys calling, reaching out and demanding some of those things. So again, ID laws, that's so critical. You know, voters, you know, being those long lines, all those things, and speaking up and signing petitions. Sending emails, all of that matters, and you can do that from your home and making sure that the elected officials hear you. But then also when they're running for office, having these tough conversations are not necessarily tough, asking them, what's your plan? How do you plan to do that? And people will respond if you continuously ask them to do that. So you're absolutely right. Dean Robinson, who may be, not Dean Robinson, Professor Robinson, who may be my cousin, who I didn't get a chance to see. But no, and it's absolutely been vocal. And what I love so much about the young generation, is that you guys are so much more fearless than we are. You know, some of us, and I would say I'm in my 30s, we're concerned about our reputation, losing your job. And you all are like, I don't care, social media, you'll post it. But people respond to pressure, and when they feel as though they're getting a bad rap and you're calling people out, those are some of the laws that have to be changed. And you're, again, voter suppression is real, and we saw what happened with Stacey Abrams in Georgia, right? Those are things that are happening every single day. So one, I would say, if you are supporting any particular candidate, whatever that may be, making sure that there are more votes than not votes is so critical, because you just can't have a close election nowadays. You have to win by a landslide for you to potentially even win the election. So again, activating your friends and family to vote is something key, but then also putting pressure behind our elected officials to change those policies and making sure they step up to the plate.
So while maybe Megan and Raphael try to see if we can bring some other folks into the conversation, I will front for Martin Sanders, who's been very active on the chat. And Martin says, I currently co-host the How About Vote podcast, where we focus on voter issues. Would you be a guest on our show, please?
Martin, when Martin? Martin, I said I'm not doing this. Is my last speaking engagement until the election. When is your podcast, Martin? Only because I was late. I may be able, oh God. Only because of technical difficulties. When's your podcast, Martin? You're about to stress me out. Oh, perfect. Yes. After the election. Yes, Martin, I will give you my personal email address after the election. 1,000%. We can talk about the election. But yes, I would love to be on your podcast. And one of the things that I want to talk about, and people are like, how do I support organizations giving us exposure, right? Giving folks exposure to spaces and places such as this, because you never know who you're going to contact. You never know who you're going to meet. And so media is a big thing. And, you know, and so thank you, Martin, for extending the opportunity. And I'll have my assistant, I'll give you her information. I'll drop it in the chat. Please email her, and we'll get it on my calendar.
Excellent. I don't know, can we bring Kelly in? I know that Nyki already answered her what I will call her first question, but I'd love to get Kelly into the conversation if we can do that technically.
I unfortunately am not sure if that's technically possible. The reason we could bring Ella and Dean Robinson in was because they posed their questions at registration, so we had that sort of technically streamlined. Apologies for everyone for that.
That's okay. We'll just do what we can. I think we're going to take Nyki and Reverend Jackson's mantra here, and we're just going to be determined and keep moving ahead, even if we encounter some obstacles here. Nyki, can I pose to you the question about your expansion and your ideas about expansion? Baltimore clearly is a great home base in that it has such needs and such potential for mobilizing Black voters. But your expansion to Detroit and Philadelphia doesn't look like an accident to me. No. I wonder if you have other expansion plans, and is the model working that you can scale this in multiple cities and multiple jurisdictions around the country?
Absolutely, the plan is to expand Black Girls Vote. So what we have been able to do, as I mentioned, Black Girls Vote is an organization within its home. But Party at the Mailbox has grown to its own initiative, and the Party at the Mailbox campaign is an initiative, again, that's fiscally sponsored by the National Conference on Citizenship, and so we're scaling that in Philadelphia, in Detroit, but then we also were looking at many battleground states this election because we saw a decrease in Black voter turnout in a lot of these cities in 2016, so we wanted to go in there and penetrate those areas, and so you're absolutely right. It was not an accident that we chose Philadelphia and Detroit, or Philadelphia and Detroit chose us because they're like, you have to come here, you know, what's happening in our communities, particularly Detroit. Detroit is very similar to Baltimore, being a blue-collar town. Baltimore is about 67% African-American. Detroit's about 70%. The population size is blue-collar town. All that's very similar, and just to be welcomed by the city of Detroit is so critical and so important because, as you all know, or folks may not know, when you're doing grassroots organizing and you're on the ground, and when you go into another community, you aren't always necessarily welcome, but people want to know who you are, where you come from, and who sent you. And more importantly, we don't know you, so we don't trust you. So that's built on trust, and that takes time. So before we even thought about going into those cities, I rounded up some community leaders who were recommended, said, hey, we want to bring this campaign to Philadelphia. We want to bring it to Detroit. Or do you all support it? Do you all welcome it? And that's relationship building. So, and I would say for anyone who's thinking about organizing, you want to expand, you want to do this and that, when you're in the trenches sometimes and, you know, people who are on the ground doing the work, it's all about relationships and the respect that's built by folks seeing you do the work. And then they're going to research you. You know, everyone's, yeah, I've researched you. I called this person about you, as you should. And I say because you represent yourself. You are a brand. And so you have to make sure that wherever spaces you go into, that people know you and they respect you, and that you keep that so close that you don't compromise your brand and your reputation for that. And so as we are looking to expand in 2021, we're looking for Black Girls Vote as chapters to expand into different cities. We have identified 10 cities across the country that we want to expand to. So we are more vocal when it comes to advocacy, building more of our strong voting bloc. But for these first 5 years, it was about building a brand. And so folks know us, respect us, and see the work that we're doing. And also, anyone, prior to this year, the largest grant that we had ever gotten was no more than $20,000. And that's the 20, like not 220, 20. And so when you think about that, it's like, wait, there's so many organizations getting so much money and so much capital. I don't work for Black Girls Vote full time yet, and so that's the balance as you're looking at people who are doing the work, and then also folks like you're trying to balance your life. You have rent, you have mortgage, you have car note, but you're so passionate about it. And one of the things that I would encourage people who are looking to get into this work, I would say for us initially, we were driven by the mission, like Black Girls Vote, but not the business. And then when you take a step back, it's like, wait, it is a business, so you have to look at both the mission and the business of it. But again, starting with the mission is great because people will like you and they'll believe in you versus the business first. But at some point you have to turn it on and say, wait, this is a business. How do I survive? How am I able to pay for health insurance? This is the first year that Black Girls Vote can pay for my health insurance, right? No, the first 3 months, not the first year. So these are the real things that are happening behind the scenes that people don't know. And so this is the struggles as organizations who are putting on the front. You'll see me on, so much press, national press, international press. You'll see it, but behind the scenes, it's so much work. And I don't want to tell you that to be afraid for anyone who's thinking about starting, but I don't want to give you this false pretense that it's going to be an amazing journey. It's going to be so smooth. It's going to be so easy. But that's what you're committing to when you're committing to doing the work. And so for anyone who's, don't know, just take that, but don't quit. As I said, be determined and be determined to figure it out, and then look for your village and those allies who will support you for putting you in spaces and places that to elevate your name, elevate your brand, and the work that you do.
Fantastic. I should let you know that we have a Do Good Institute at the school that focuses on helping students build and lead nonprofit organizations.
Yes.
And works with philanthropies. And so I think there may be some real interest from some of our Maryland students in a homegrown example of a struggling but successful nonprofit that you are running. So I think I'd like to make some connections for you and with you there for our Do Good folks, because I think there, in addition to the people on this today, there's some real potential for some institutional collaboration there.
Absolutely. And I'll tell people the glow up is real. We recently got a $100,000 grant, right? And I said prior to this year. And so, and it's the consistency, right? It's the consistency. And sometimes when you don't think people are watching you and they want to support you. It's all about timing. And so for us now, things are starting to, grow exponentially for us. But it is a process. And I'll tell anyone, trust your process. Don't trust Nike's process. Trust your process. And one thing I can say personally that I struggled with at some point, I didn't grow up poor, right? I didn't come up, when you hear Baltimore, you're like, oh, you lived in the trenches, your mother was this, your father was that. That wasn't my journey, right? And so I'm like, wait, when you hear people from Baltimore, people automatically think like, oh, you had a rough life. I grew up in the suburbs, and I moved into the county, and we were hood rich, meaning we weren't wealthy at all, right? But I had pretty nice things. But, when I looked at Baltimore, I'm like, well, some of these people, they have a struggle. People want to buy into their story because it's like, you didn't have your mother, you didn't have your father. But I have a different journey and a different story, and I'm okay with that and accepting that. And so whoever you are, and I know there's some people here of privilege who may be like, well, I don't know if I can do that. Yes, you can, right? Because you have access and you have spaces that you can uplift someone else in. And when you lead from a place of passion, that shows. And people can see through the bullcrap. They absolutely can.
That's people can see through the bullcrap is a great way to put an exclamation point on this conversation. Nyki, I do want to respect your time, and I appreciate your determination to get through our technical difficulties today. But you've not only given us a lot to think about, you've also given us a bit of a roadmap for some things we can do, and I think I would love to see ongoing connections between the School of Public Policy and Black Girls Vote and everything you're doing. And I see Claire nodding to that. She's our lead on this, and I think that was her hope in the students who voted for who they wanted to come speak as a Brody speaker. So we commit to you to stay in touch with you and do what we can to help you with your mission. I just heard someone come in. Is someone else there with a question? Nope. Okay.
All you.
Okay.
All you, Nyki.
But if I could say really quickly, Dean, as you were mentioning that, and I think Kelly's question really sticks out to me because there's so many young women on your campus that are struggling with this, right? Yes. And so she's not an isolated person. There are many Kellys out there, and that Kelly, I thank you, Kelly, for being bold enough to, speak up, because those are things that we struggle with internally. And so I think that, I'll say invest in Black women, right? And I say that not to take anything from Black men, but, you have no idea what people are going through. And, for her to be bold enough to say that, there are so many other girls or people on campus who are struggling, right? And so they need that extra support because you don't know what their home life may be like. And as I went through some of the data earlier, when we look at some, the households and some of the backgrounds that some of us have grown up in, we're battling two different things. We're, trying to battle being in school. But then I felt like in college that I had to make sure my family was okay. I wouldn't do certain things because I had the stress of growing up earlier than other people, meaning I had different responsibilities because even though I didn't grow up poor, I grew up in a household with mental illness, right? Where my dad bipolar schizophrenic. So that stress alone is I couldn't be a kid, so I'm trying to figure out that. And so I felt isolated in the space that I wasn't until maybe 5 years ago I started telling people that my dad is diagnosed, but as a kid I struggle with that. And so there's so many things that people struggle with who don't have safe spaces. So I would love to see that the University of Maryland College Park begins to be not only a safe space, but people begin to be more comfortable talking about some of the things. And you start to see change. You start to see some of the things that, some of the Black students are saying, I see an intentional effort to be more inclusive, but then also you're seeing more people excel. Because as I mentioned with Black Girls Vote and Partisan Mailbox, we grew because someone saw the vision and they invested in us, and that we've been able to grow and build and scale. And it was one person, to be quite honest, that sponsored us vocally, not even financially.
Well, Nyki, you're spot on in your analysis of our campus. We do have people that are looking for that, not only safe space, but a place to belong. And I think our journey has begun, but we could use some company on the journey. So while we commit to try to help you with your mission, I'm also a little bit greedy. I would like to have you help us. So we can do this both ways.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will get you some of these names and contacts that you've asked for, and we are not only going to watch you sail here, but we'd like to join you on your journey if you'll join us on ours. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I commit to you, and thank you guys so much, Claire. Thank you so much. I had no idea that students voted. See the power of voting, right? It's so important. And that's what happens. It's about mutually beneficial relationships. And as Dean just said, I'll help you on your journey, but I'm greedy. And that's what politics is all about, you guys. That's so simple, the perfect way to close it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm humbled. I'm honored, Dean. I am here. I am committed to helping you and the Kellys that are on your campus and any other people. I will open myself up to even do a smaller conversation, just an intimate conversation, but not until November 4th and after, because I need a break. Don't even email me November 4th. Martin, email me November 8th or whatever that may be. But again, thank you so much, and I look forward to growing and building a relationship with you all.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much, Nyki.
All right. Thank you all. Bye.
All right.
Partisan Mailbox. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and everything else. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nyki, and thank you, Dinor, and thanks everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed the conversation.